or,
We all came to this thing.
Yeah.
At the very least, you had to click on a link. You had to register, and you had to click on a link to be here.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's your invitation.
I love that. And it's always great chatting with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, I hope the rest of your week is great.
All right. Thanks. You too. Talk to you
later. Thanks, Trisha. Bye.
Bye.
One of the things that's most exciting for the team here at InfoTrack is just how much fun people seem to have at Legal Up, all while learning. And I'm going to hand it off to Kitty to talk about some of the ways that you can do that if it's your first time here or you're returning again. Just make the most out of your connecting at Legal Up.
Hey, that's me. I'm Kitty. I'm the content manager here at InfoTrack, and I'm sharing how a lot of people have a lot of fun at Legal Up. The chat is where it's at. If you look over to the right while you're in a session, you'll see that you're in a session chat. That's where you can talk to other people who are seeing the same presentation that you are, and the speaker and the staff at Legal Up. The public chat is where you can talk to everybody at the Legal Up event. That's kind of like water cooler chat for the entirety of the event. It does not go to the speaker in the session that you're in unless they leave the session. So make sure if you're trying to talk to a speaker or somebody else in your session that you're using that session tab. You can also send direct messages to other attendees, which is a great way to network with people that you meet in the sessions and in the public chat. I recommend sending your LinkedIn profile to anybody that you want to connect with outside of the event. And speaking of LinkedIn, one of the great ways that you can connect with people both inside and outside of the event and on demand is by posting your favorite insights and quotes from Legal Up with hashtag LegalUp2025 on LinkedIn and other social media channels.
Absolutely. We can't wait to see how you all engage this year, connections you make, the friendships or networking opportunities you forge, however you do that. Thanks so much again for making Legal Up so much more interactive and engaging than it would have been otherwise. We're going to kick it over to Veronica to share about some of the amazing prizes you have the chance to win at Legal Up this year.
Hi there, I'm Veronica Williams, Growth Marketing Manager for InfoTrack.
And I'm Joe Scott, Campaign Marketing Manager for InfoTrack. And Veronica, what can you tell us about prize support for Legal Up 2025?
This year for Legal Up, we have so many awesome prizes to win. You have a variety of prizes you can win. First off, we're giving away 25 $10 Starbucks gift cards. To win, simply stay tuned in the chat and answer our Starbucks coffee polls, and we'll be hosting during every presentation. Everyone who answers a question is entered to win. We're also going to be giving away a virtual office party with featuring foods that broke the internet. You can choose from a variety of snack options to feature at your very first virtual office party. We're going to be doing this via a raffle, and you can click the Documents tab to fill out that form to enter the raffle on a daily basis. The last awesome gift that we're giving away is a $500 Airbnb. To be entered to win this, you need to attend Legal Luminaries Paralegal Edition live on Thursday, April 24th. Everyone who attends the session will be entered to win automatically, so make sure you attend. Finally, we're giving away 100 different Legal Up bento boxes. These are going to be given away to the first 100 people who complete our end of the event survey. So make sure you do all of these so you can win big prizes at Legal Up.
Awesome. That's a lot of great prizes, Veronica. I gotta know, though, if you could win one option from the virtual office party, which one would it be?
Personally, I'd love to win the $500 Airbnb gift card. I mean, who doesn't want a free getaway?
That's a great choice, and we're going to take a quick break. And then coming up, I'll be back with Lindsay to talk about all of the excellent speakers that we've programmed for Legal Up 2025. Stay tuned.
I'll say that developing the program, finding the speakers, hearing about all of the incredible presentations and themes and topics that this vibrant community of experts comes up with is one of my favorite parts of planning for Legal Up each year.
Yeah, and I feel like this year's call for speakers had a unique challenge in that we had so many people submitting so many great ideas that, during our programming meetings, it got hard. We had a lot of yeses, and then the maybes list was just so huge that we really had to fight just to keep this locked to 2 days. We did it. We have 22 presentations. I'm not going to rattle them all off here right now today, Lindsay, but what I will do is just share a few highlights. We'll start, of course, with our keynote, Uncovering Your Natural Gifts with Chad Abood. Chad is a former TED Talk speaker. He's great. I've met him. He's awesome. And he's going to be sharing practical exercises for uncovering the traits, the innate passions that motivate us, and then ways to identify the career tracks and the career spaces that allow those innate passions to put you in a place where you are most successful.
Yeah, and it's really just I love this because it's such a human aspect, and it's so refreshing to be told about that, the unique parts of you, the things that are not cookie cutter, or the strengths that you have that you might not even think about as strengths, are things you can lean into to make things work better, to power up your life and the things you invest in. So I'm really looking forward to Chad's session.
Yeah, I cannot wait. I'm definitely going to be there for that one. The next one I want to share is about something we're all using all the time, but maybe not using as good as we could. I'm talking about our digital cameras for virtual meetings with clients and colleagues. This presentation is All Eyes on You, How Lawyers Can Use Video to Amplify Their Reach, with Temi Shianbade. And I think this is great because I once read a study, this just came out very recently, about how even the quality of your microphone can really hurt people's ability.
Legal Up is made stronger this year in huge part thanks to our incredible sponsors and fellow legal tech providers. Thank you to MyCase, our platinum sponsor, Assembly Neos, our gold sponsor, Smokeball, our silver sponsor, Leap and Filevine, our bronze sponsors. You'll see these names and their product showcases throughout Legal Up. Please be sure to drop in and see what our partners are up to, and thank you to all of you for your support of Legal Up 2025. That's all from us at the Legal Up team for now. You're going to see our faces throughout the event as we support our amazing speakers on the virtual stage. Feel free to ask us any questions directly or in the chat. With that, we'll end with a short message from our platinum sponsor, MyCase. See you all very soon, and thank you for joining us at Legal Up 2025.
Why do 60,000 legal professionals choose MyCase as a partner in their success? Designed specifically for law firms, MyCase offers industry-leading business management software to help you convert leads and get clients onboarded quickly with dynamic online forms. Foster collaboration using cloud-based case management and secure communication portals. Streamline tasks and workflows with tailored legal AI. And experience unparalleled financial control with built-in spend management and legal accounting. Freeing your focus for high-impact work, helping you to deliver exceptional service every time. So why MyCase? Because your law firm deserves a partner as dynamic and dedicated as you. MyCase, practice management made simple.
But above all else, you want to ensure that employees remain engaged from day 1 to day 100, or however long the change management process takes. And that's why it's super important to ensure that they're always engaged and that you're actually listening to their input and valuing their input, and not just listening, but then really just simply waiting for a chance to speak. So with respect to phased implementation, this is something I referred to earlier. Oftentimes it helps to implement changes in smaller groups so they can gather feedback, so that you can, get a sense of what is working, what isn't working, in terms of perhaps a process you had developed that you thought would work for implementing, but perhaps isn't working and need to update. And also so that you can minimize potential risk before scaling out the change. And the other part of it too, and this is perhaps more important than ever in this age of AI and fast technological change, is to be adaptable, ensuring that your team, that your business is flexible and responsive to changes that occur that you're not expecting, that weren't foreseeable, that you weren't necessarily anticipating, to ensure that change is occurring as it needs to happen, and ensuring quite possibly that you're moving in the direction you need to be moving in. And that sometimes means, quite frankly, shifting focus from what you thought you were needing to do to something else because of a new capability, or something that just frankly isn't working, or perhaps you did a pilot program and it just didn't play out. You need to ensure that you can adapt and have people be open to adapting. And that means ensuring, again, that you're getting their feedback, that they're engaged in the process from day 1. And that's why, for me personally, as the leader of a legal function at a fast-moving, fast-growing organization, that I am always getting feedback and engaging with other folks to ensure that we're all on the same page as we're moving forward, and ensuring that I'm best supporting them as I can as I move forward with whatever changes I'm trying to make. And so the more you can sort of engage with others and ensure that they're all in place, and everyone's aligned, the better off you'll be. And that's why I think it's really, again, important to have implementation that takes place in a series of stages. Because if you want to enable, if you have change that just starts and ends all at the same time, what happens is people feel discouraged. They'll feel like, oh, well, I only did this because I had to, but I didn't feel like I was a part of it. I feel like I didn't have ownership over it. And so that's why I think it's important to have different stages. And also different stages allows you to better adapt, as I mentioned before you fully enact a particular change. I just want to stop here for a brief moment and see if there are any questions, because I've been throwing a lot of information out at you. And I want to ensure that people are on the same page before I continue, because I, for one, am a big fan of engaging with others during sessions and not just simply talking everyone's ear off. So let me just stop here and see if there's any any questions first. Doesn't look like there are any changes at this point, so I will continue. But please do feel free to pose questions. I want to make sure that people feel like they are getting the information they need from this session. A couple other things I want to mention about phased implementation. Oftentimes, and this is something I talk about a lot, is it really helps to start small and then adapt. Because what happens is, if you start small, you can then have a better chance of being successful and then build off of that success. And this can happen with all sorts of things, whether it's been a legal tech implementation, whether it's some other type of change, whether it's improving a process, whatever it is. Oftentimes, if you start small, it's easier to achieve, and the likelihood of success is higher, and therefore you can build off of that success moving forward, which is really helpful and also encouraging for people, because people want to be successful. And when it comes to change, which is an uncomfortable subject, allowing for people to be a part of it and feeling like they are being successful from the start is really helpful. So I really encourage folks to start small. So that is something I would mention. I see that we have a question about the legal implementations and requirements for implementing employee productivity monitoring tools, particularly in terms of employee consent, data privacy, and transparency. So let me continue on for a little bit and then get to that question a little bit later, because I do think it's an important question, and actually will be part of my next slide that I get to. I also want to mention that when you start small and are successful, what you end up having is you have a coalition, if you will, of people who've been successful and then can be champions going forward of what you're trying to do. And by having those champions, you're able to then spread positivity and encouragement throughout the organization and therefore allow for more successful change going forward. But I'm not going to lie. At the end of the day, change is hard. It's not always fun. It's oftentimes something that requires a lot of work, a lot of resetting of expectations. And so that's why I think it's important for folks to kind of start small and build from there rather than try to go all at once for some big change. So with respect to monitoring, so a couple things. When it comes to change, I think that it's really important to have ways of measuring progress. One of those ways of measuring progress is through KPIs, or key performance indicators. And it's important to define the right ones. It could be adoption rates, employee satisfaction, production metrics, spotting emerging friction points. It's really important to have some way of measuring performance. And the best way to do that is through collecting data points and identifying areas for improvement. In addition, by monitoring change and by monitoring these KPIs, you can better sustain the change as well through better training, better communication, and you can also reinforce behaviors through rewarding employees who have most successfully adapted to whatever change is taking place, or those who perhaps are most contributing to leading the charge with respect to a change. So that is also something that is important. So Ray's question is not quite tied to this, but let me answer it. With respect to legal limitations and requirements around employee monitoring, there's a lot of tricky elements there, particularly around, as Ray mentioned, employee consent, data privacy, and transparency. First and foremost, I think it's really important for employees to be made aware of that there is such a tool in place, and that their behavior is monitored. In addition to data privacy, you want to ensure that the data that is collected is shared only with those who have need to know, and those who have only the level of access that they legally should have to that data. And also it's transparent about what data is collected, how often and when and where and why. I was part of an organization in the past where there was a sort of a relatively low intrusiveness tool that was monitoring performance, but people were very upfront about it. It was very well understood, and the data was anonymized and aggregated, so there's no real worry about data privacy. Just want to answer that question. It's a little bit off topic, but happy to answer that question. Going back to my slide here for a minute, I think it's really important to also understand, and collecting KPIs will show this, is that change is not just about getting from A to Z. It's also about the journey itself. Because often what will happen when you're collecting these data points is you'll find out other things about your organization you didn't necessarily realize that you perhaps may want to address, either as part of this change management process or as another one. And therefore, doing this KPI monitoring process can actually yield a variety of benefits beyond just understanding where you are in terms of progress being made with respect to a certain change that needs to happen or is happening. So that is something that I think is really important. And it really has to, you want to start with the beginning. You really want to have those KPIs in place before you start this process, because you don't want to worry about figuring out what KPIs you're collecting as you're also trying to enable and enact this change. You want to have these KPIs understood first before you move forward with the change that's occurring. So I want to talk a little bit now about different types of frameworks that I alluded to earlier in the previous slide. There are a variety of them out there. Not every model is perfect. Not every model is going to be right for you, but there are a number of them out there that I would like to mention. Three of perhaps the more prominent ones are the ADKAR model, the Lewin's Change Management model, McKinsey 7S model. And so let me start with the ACTAR model. So this model focuses on individual change. In other words, it focuses on the human element, as I mentioned before, which is so very important with respect to change. And so what it looks at is desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And really what this means is it's looking at each individual's ability to change and readiness for change in terms of how aware they are of what change is taking place, their desire to change, do they have enough awareness and enough information that they can change, and how that change is being reinforced for them as well. So that's one potential model. It doesn't work for every organization, but it's just one example. Another one is a relatively simple approach that looks at three things: preparing for the change, implementing the change, and stabilizing. In other words, ensuring that the change lasts. And what that really does is it looks at how your organization is prepared for the change. Do you have the cultural support in place? Do you have the people in place? Do you have the various champions in place? How are you going about implementing the change itself? How is it going to occur? Why is it going to occur? What's the timeline for it? And then afterwards, making sure that people understand the change, making sure people are on board with it, and ensuring that it's working for people. And it allows for you to view the change through a variety of different dynamics, all with a human-centric focus. Because again, change is a human journey. It is a journey focused on people more than anything else, and it's super important to be focused on people and how they feel about the change. The last model I want to mention is McKinsey 7S model. This is a more holistic framework that looks at different interconnected elements: strategy, alignment across the organization with that strategy, what systems are in place to enable that change, does the organization have the cultural values supportive of that change, how is the organization going about enabling that change, what is their style of that change, how's the support in place, do we have the right staff, employees to enable that change, and then perhaps most importantly, do we have people that are enabled with the right skills that they need to not only undergo the change, but to sustain it going forward. And so it's really a comprehensive model that looks at all these different elements and how they are aligned. Because in an organization, it's not enough often to just have cultural support for the change and have champions and have people that are eager for the change, but you want to make sure that people actually can be aligned with the change through their skill sets, which sometimes means upskill. For example, again, looking at the AI tools that exist now, AI kind of came onto the scene somewhat suddenly, and now we're all faced with a plethora of different AI tools, and everyone's asking each other, are you using AI? Are you using this tool? Are you using that tool? But no one has really focused on asking, which is, I think, a really important question, is how are you prepared? How are you preparing to use AI or whatever other tool that may exist that you're shifting gears to using or what have you? And that requires really get a sense of what skills people have, what their level of readiness is, what skills they don't have that they do need going forward. And often that means training, retraining, upskilling in order to ensure that the change can occur and also that the change can last after it's occurred. And I believe we have another question. Got it. So let me answer the first question first, that I see, at least from Christopher. When it comes to implementing change, do you think it's more effective to choose a cheerleader who's enthusiastic and supportive, or would it be better to involve a vigorous complainer who might offer valuable insights and constructive criticism? So that's a really, really good question. My view personally is that if you got the cheerleader who's already enthusiastic and supportive, great. You can count on that. I think you really want to go after the biggest complainer, the person who's most resistant, because if you can get them on board, that will show your other employees that, hey, the most negative person who's most against the change is on board with this, and therefore perhaps it's a great idea for you to be on board with it as well. And also they'll feel like they have a part to play because you're actually involving them in the process. You're actually allowing them to share their insights, provide their criticism, offering them ownership over the process. So I actually think that's a really good move, is to involve the so-called complainer, or the person who seems most resistant to change at the outset. And of course, you want to involve the cheerleader as well and encourage them to remain supportive. But because they're already supportive, I don't think it's necessarily important to focus on them first. It's rather important to focus on the area of resistance first. So the next question I see is, if you are an employee who thinks some of these factors should be added to a new program or change, how do you suggest going to the people in charge? So my suggestion is, when you're dealing with leadership and feel like you want to convey something to them, is just be very upfront with them, but also understand how they're going to react and view whatever your message is. So in other words, you need to know your audience. So you need to understand, what are they focused on, what are they most worried about, and frame whatever it is you're trying to share with your leader in that framework, in that lens, so that they best understand it, they take it in, they respond to it. Often what will happen is people think, oh, well, I want to say something to a leader and I'm just going to say it, but they don't take into account who they're speaking to, not in terms of level of leadership, but in terms of their personality, what they're most focused on, what they care most about. Oftentimes, the best way to get a message to resonate with someone is to frame it through what they most are passionate about and what they care the most about. So I think that's really something important to keep in mind. With respect to, I see a question about a preferred change-related model. Do I have a preferred one? I don't personally, and that's mainly because I'm a very context-driven individual, and it's really important to understand the context of your situation and apply the framework that best fits the context, because I'm not a big believer in one size fits all in terms of one framework works for everyone or what have you. So I realize it's a little bit of a kind of a lawyerly, it depends type of answer, but honestly, that is the truth is that, I think you need to really understand sort of the context that you're dealing with and figure out what model best suits that context. With regards to best key metrics for change management, yes. So I think there are a number of interesting metrics you can look at. You can look at, number of employees who have reached a different stage of the change. Who's at stage 1, who's at stage 2, and track their progress. You can look at, hey, we've got, these users that are sort of, that are, this is a novel tool for them. And then we have more experienced users. you can measure sort of level of expertise as well. And then you can also do sort of a percentage of, progress. Okay, well, we're at 10%. Our goal by, X month is to get to 25%. Our goal by month Y is to get to, another percent. That's another metric you can look at. It really often is sort of very driven by the change that you're trying to enact and the level of work that's going to require to move forward with that change. But I often think there are a number of different metrics. Sometimes you want to start with more broader metrics, and then as you get more into the change management process, you want to move to more specific ones. Really appreciate the questions, by the way. I want to go back to something I said actually around cheerleaders versus complainers. I've worked for a variety of different organizations of different sizes, of different sophistications, of different sort of levels of leadership. I've worked in heavily matrixed organizations and then in those that are not as heavily matrixed. And throughout all of my different roles that I've had, what I've learned really time and time again about people when it comes to change and cheerleaders versus complainers is that the cheerleaders are great, but you really, as I said before, you really want to go after those who are most resistant and most negative about the change, because the cheerleader is already on board. In some ways, you're already preaching to the choir. It's great that you have them, and you should be very thankful and be very appreciative and express that appreciation. But it's really important to go after those who don't seem to be on board with what you're doing and are most resistant to it, and just be upfront with them and talk to them, understand where they're coming from, why they feel the way they feel, acknowledge their feelings, frankly, acknowledge why they're not on board with the change or feel like it's not the right thing to do. And the more you can get them to understand that you're hearing them, that you understand where they're coming from, and that you're taking what they're saying into account, the more likely it is you're going to get them on board. And that is something that I think is really important, because people want to be heard. They want to feel like they have a role to play. They want to feel like they are a part of what is happening. And the more they can feel like they are a part of that, the more likely it is they're going to be on board with what it is you're trying to do. And so, oftentimes I've seen leaders, dismiss or ignore or overlook those who are negative because, their view is, oh, these people are always just so negative. They're always just, trying to get in the way. I'm not going to worry about them. I'm going to focus on the people who actually want to do this because they're supportive of it, and I really want to be supportive of them. I actually think that's not necessarily always the best approach. You really want to account for everyone and ensure that everyone's voice is heard. And I realize that can be sometimes hard in more larger organizations, but that's again why having clear communication and transparency about what it is you're trying to do and actually having listening sessions is so important when it comes to change. Because you want to make sure that everyone feels like they have a part to play and that they are in whatever that they are in it to win it, so to speak, and they feel like they are there and that they're being heard and that their input is actually being accounted for when you're changing. Because again, change is hard for people. And I will go back to something I said at the very first slide, which is that human nature is to find something that works and stick with it and not move off of that. And I think it goes back actually to our ancestors who were hunter-gatherers and who goal was simply survival and to find that food they needed. So whatever worked for them. And that has been a part of, I think, our human DNA for a very long period of time. It just now expresses itself in different ways as a result of how we've evolved and what new things exist. But the bottom line is we like it when we feel like we know what we're doing. And when we don't, or when we feel like something is astray, we revert back to what it was that made us feel comfortable. And bottom line is with change is oftentimes the message has to be, to some degree, I wouldn't necessarily say it as bluntly as I will say it here, but in some ways, especially with technology, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable to some degree because change just happens so rapidly with technology, especially. So, leading effective change. As I've mentioned, you really want to have early and often engagement with key stakeholders, with leadership. You want to establish internal champions, both in leadership positions as well as in other positions. And oftentimes, if you can get a champion, even if it's a reluctant champion from one of those so-called complainers, all the better. If you can't, that's great, but you really want to pay attention to those complainers, so to speak, because you don't want to let their negativity spread. So the more you can go after them and ensure that they feel like they're supportive and they're being heard, the better off you'll be. When you're rolling out the change, you want to make sure that you have it in different stages and that there's different phases and you're measuring the progress by phase if you have different phases. And lastly, and most importantly, I would say, or equally importantly, is you want to align the new change with a very specific and well-defined business goal so people really understand why it is that you're doing what you're doing and what sort of the ultimate goal is. And so that they understand that this change is to achieve this goal. And when defining that goal, you want to make sure that it's a goal that is shared by everyone, meaning that it's not just a goal for just sort of the, amorphous business, but it's a goal for everyone that will help everyone over the long term. Because the more you can make it seem like this change is in everyone's best interest and it's actually as good for them as it is for whoever is promoting and wanting the change to occur and leading the change, the better off you'll be. And that's super, I think, really important. And that allows for more cultural support of whatever change you're trying to achieve. But look, I'm going to be very honest with you. It's very easy to talk about all these different frameworks and about all these different ways of engaging with people. Change is messy. It just is. It's messy. It's hard. It's sometimes unpredictable. Often leads to uncomfortable conversations. You have to embrace all of that with change. That just is the bottom line. You have to embrace the fact that change is not always everyone's cup of tea. Even those who may like change or always are, all for change, everyone has a limit. Everyone has a change they're not going to like. And so you just have to acknowledge that and be aware that we're all human and we all are driven as much by our desire to achieve and be successful as we are by our own emotions. And so we have to acknowledge how we feel as much as how we think. And that needs to be a part of how we manage change as well. And so again, change is something that we're all part of, we all have to do, but all too often, I would argue, gets overlooked, especially when it comes to implementing technology solutions, because oftentimes people get very attracted to a shiny technology and want to put it in place, but then forget about, well, I need to make sure my whole organization's on board. I need to make sure I have the right people in place. I need to make sure that the people that I want to be using the tool actually are going to be using this tool. Because I've seen and read stories of organizations and been a part of an organization where a new tool was put in place. And the tool was great, but it wasn't used by anyone because everyone was very comfortable using their existing tool. People didn't want to take time to learn this new tool. They weren't given the time to learn the new tool. So what ended up happening was this was an expensive tool that just ended up sitting on the proverbial shelf and wasn't used, collecting dust, if you will. And that was not an ideal outcome. And even worse, it made it harder for people to adapt and want to change and want to use new tools going forward because of their negative memories from that failed change that occurred before. Because people often remember negative events stronger in their mind and longer than they do positive events, for better, for worse, often for worse. So that's why it's really important to be effective when leading change. And that's why it's important to embrace the fact that it's a messy process and not always a process that's as clear cut as it may seem, as I've talked about. So a few final thoughts here. Number one, you always want to be learning. You always want to be learning not just about how you're working, but about how others are working. And you want to perhaps collect data about how people are working and what is allowing people to be most productive and what is forcing people to be not as productive as they would like to be. Learning is not a process that starts and ends with school or starts and ends at any given time. It's a lifelong journey. Secondly, adaptive communication. And what I mean by this is, again, communication is incredibly important. So you want to make sure that you are always engaging in a two-way dialogue, that you're always listening as much as you're talking, and that you're always ensuring that your communication about anything is consistent and it's transparent. And lastly, you want to make sure that you have a culture that supports those things that are important, especially when it comes to change. You want to make sure that your culture is supportive of the change you're trying to enact. Because if that's not in place, the likelihood is you can do as much learning and as clear communication as you want. It's not necessarily going to work out all that well if you don't have a culture that is supportive of whatever change is going to happen, which again is why you want to have a people first change management process. So I will leave it there. We have 10 minutes left for any remaining questions, but I really hope that this was helpful. I am more than happy to chat with anyone afterwards. If they would like to, you can connect with me online. I'm on LinkedIn, quite active on there. I'm also on X and on Instagram and on a variety of other platforms. And yeah, I really appreciate everyone's time and attendance. And I hope that this helped at least give you a little bit of a foundation to build off of when it comes to change. And look, I get it. This is not change management is a hard topic. It's an easy one to talk about, a hard one to put in place. So just know that, it isn't always going to be easy or rainbows and unicorns. So just want to thank you all very much for attending. And again, please feel free to get in touch if you would like to afterwards.
Thank you very much, Colin, for this great presentation. We did have a few audience questions during the event. Can we share some of those and just see if we can help anyone? Here, let me pull them up really quick. Here is one that I like to sort of very specialized. Yes. Jeremy wanted to know which of the frameworks you proposed tends to work best with smaller teams, which I think, I guess that's a great idea because some of the solutions that you propose sort of, I think, require a bit more manpower. So what would you suggest for the smaller teams?
Yeah, so I think for the smaller teams, I think either the Lewin model or the ADKAR works better because both tend to be a little more focused on sort of the human element and are less sort of more broader organizational level framework. So I would look at those initially, but also keep in mind there are others as well. So just because I mentioned those three, I'm suggesting two that might be better for small teams. They're not the only ones that exist that would work best for a small team, but out of those that I mentioned, those two would probably be best.
Excellent. I think this is more of an observation, but I thought it was a great point. I'll share this. Julian said, just like an electrical circuit, resistors exist to prevent overload. I'm the resistor in my org. And how do I address constructively that the changes are everything, everywhere, all at once? And so maybe not so much an observation, but just wanting to know how they express the resistance.
Yeah, I mean, me being both a lawyer as well as sometimes a resistor, in some ways, I can totally relate to this statement. And so I think the way to address it is to kind of have examples, have data that kind of better inform why you feel that way and how you can show it. Because it's one thing to say, all this change is just overload, it's too much, I feel whatever. It's better if you can be specific and detailed in what it is exactly that you feel is making you feel that way, and what would make it better to do so, or what would make you feel better about it. But I totally
Excellent.
can relate to that. My role as a lawyer in my org oftentimes is to not get in the way of things, but slow things down sometimes. So I totally can understand, Julian.
All right, let me see. I really liked this one, and I apologize if we already answered it, but if you're an employee who thinks some of these factors should be added to a new program or change, how do you suggest going to the people in charge?
Yeah, so I addressed this a little bit earlier, but I would suggest that if you want to be added, if you think things should be added to a program or a change, you want to understand your audience. You want to understand what the people in charge care most about, what they're most focused on, and frame whatever it is that you're going to be talking about around that, so that they understand it and they're most receptive to it. Because the way messages are most received is if you know your audience, understand what they care most about, and speak to those things, that will allow for your message to be heard more easily, and you'll have to do less convincing and likely less sort of, have less of a back and forth. It's not always easy, by the way, but that would be what I would suggest.
Yeah, I think that also speaks to the environment, Colin, because I think one of the best ways for leaders to sell their teams on change is to make them feel that they own it and that they are part of driving the change, and that the data that they're gathering and implementing the change is used to help optimize the process. So I think asking that question almost indicates a problem in terms of implementation too. So I think leaders need to be cognizant of that. When they're dealing with the complainers or the resistors, did they do a good job of selling the change to their team?
Right. Yeah. No, I think that oftentimes you have to be a bit of a seller when you're trying to enable change, when you're trying to enact it. And selling is hard. Doesn't matter what you're trying to sell. Oftentimes, selling ideas is harder than selling a product. So that is why having a clear plan in place, being clear about what you're communicating, and having a framework in place is so important, as well as ensuring that you are bringing people into the fold.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Do we have any other questions here?
I see one question here from Aisha. How do you overcome embracing change when some people resist change because they're old school? My age gap based on some of my employees becomes problematic when implementing necessary change. So I'm of two minds about that. One is understand why people are old school. Is it old school because they simply are following what they've been trained to do and believe that that's just the right way to do it because it's the way we've always done it? Or it's because they have a fear of learning something new, or it could be both. And therefore, they don't want to change because they fear and they're already doing well enough with how things are currently operating. And with respect to either one of those two things, I think that the way to go about it is to educate them, is to help them, is to show them kind of what they could be doing better in a way that they can understand, and make it be more about them and you hearing them than it is about you just wanting to do something differently. Because the more you can make something be about the person who's most resistant to something and less about the person trying to push that change, more easily they'll come on board.
Yeah.
Of course, I say that and it takes time, but honestly, the more you can make it about something other than yourself, the more likely of being successful you'll likely be.
I think it's also important when dealing with people who are old school to remember that a lot of the principles from the old school still work in a new context. I see a lot of people sort of embracing AI video, but they don't realize that a lot of the visual storytelling techniques in videography still exist there. And so you see what I call video vomit a lot of times on social media. And just because we're starting a new class doesn't mean we're leaving the old school. You carry the old knowledge and roll it into the new platform.
Exactly. We're always learning. And look, what you learned in the past is just simply being added to the foundation of what you're learning that's new.
Yeah. All right. I don't know if we have any other questions, Colin, but what I wanted to say to you is thank you so much for being our first speaker here at Legal Up 2025. It was an honor to book you and to host you, and we really appreciate everything that you've shared with our audience today to get things going for 2025.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really thank everyone who's in attendance, and like I said, I'm more than happy to help any attendees going forward. So don't hesitate to get in touch. And I just want to, thank everyone for having me. InfoTrack, Joe, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
All right. We'll see you soon, folks.